So again, where are you guys coming in from? Ron says make 250 dials a week or get 1 or 2 meetings, get 8 meetings or 1 listing. Yeah, that's exactly it. I made 12K first year, 103K the second year. Most don't realize if you try to earn before you learn, you'll get burned. Ooh, good rhyming there, Greg. 100%, guys. You can do a whole lot. It usually doesn't come in the first year. Most people like that old Tony Robbins quote, right? I'll modify it for commercial real estate. Most people overestimate what they can do in year 1 and underestimate what they do in year 2, right? So it's very, very possible to really knock it out of the park with the right plan, doing the right thing over and over again. Okay. So folks, I'm going to go ahead and hop right into it. Okay. Today, we're going to talk about the top 10 mistakes to avoid your first year in commercial brokerage. Now, and by the way, thumbs up. You guys can see me. Gus, can you see the yellow and gray screen? Okay, thank you, buddy. Appreciate it. By the way, looking forward to talking to you later this week. Awesome. Okay, so when you get started in anything, especially this business, right? Knowing what to do is very important. No one will ever tell you anything to the opposite, right? But also knowing what not to do can be equally important, if not more important. Because last I checked, folks, everybody, and I mean everybody, has the same 24 hours in a day, right? So is it safe to say that some people that make more money or get more out of their day, they just know how to use that same 24 hours better, a little bit more effective, right? So imagine if you were trying to, I don't know, drive from home to work, right? And imagine if you drove the same way every single time and you get there the same time every day. It takes 8 minutes or 10 minutes or 12 minutes, whatever. But then imagine trying to get to work and then you take a detour and you go around and you get lost in some streets and then you go down the highway and you come back, right? And it takes you longer, right? Why? You would never do that in your commute to work. Why? Because you know the fastest way of getting there. So why not employ a business model where you can have a repeatable result, where you can get to work the same time? Why? Because gives you the highest level of probability that you're going to get to work on time and you're going to get the desired result. Does that make sense, folks? Type a 1 in the chat if that makes sense. If you want to have a repeatable process that you can follow so you can get a predictable result, okay? Because that's what it really comes down to, folks. Getting predictable results. And then it's just a question of increasing what you're doing that's working and avoiding things that aren't working, right? Chris, you've done business better. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Ron, how you been? Good to see you. Yep. Let's see. Yep. There's absolutely a major tie-in with the amount of hands you shake and the money you make, right? The more times you reach out over and over again, it makes total sense that the people that are doing the most amount of outbound outreach, okay, are making the most amount of money. Okay. So let's talk about some of the things that we want to talk about here, right? Very, very important. Now, first of all, folks, let's talk about gaps. Okay. People say, what's a gap? What do you mean? Okay. First of all, I'd like to see, what does everyone want to make in the next 12 months? Go ahead and do me a favor and put that in the chat. By the way, Ron, I think we did that warehouse and yard deal up in Broward County for Jarelco, I think it was, if I'm not mistaken. I think that's what it was. Yeah, I remember. Yep. Okay, cool. All right. Missy says 250. Judith says 350. Pietro says 200. Sarah says 1 million. Love it. Okay, guys. Awesome. So now you know where you want to go. Now, all right, I don't want anyone to tell me how much they made last year, but take what you want to make in the next 12 months, okay, and subtract out what you made last year, okay? Write that down on a piece of paper. So what you want to make in the next 12 months, okay? So Judith wants to make 350, Pietro wants to make 200, right? Now subtract out what you made in the last year and go ahead and in commercial, yeah, or just in general, in whatever your business that you're in. If you're on the residential side, Missy, no problem, okay? And I just want you to put what the difference is between what you want to make in the next year and what you made last year. Go ahead and put that in the chat. Okay, because I'm about to blow your mind with something very, very important. Okay, it's going to put the whole talk today into context. Okay, so Pietro says 142. Okay, love it. All right, Sarah says 800. Okay, good. Greg says 150. Okay, Dave says 510. Okay, now we're talking, folks. Okay, so this is the difference between what you want to make and what you did make. Okay. Now, the difference between what you want to make and what you did make, that's called your gap. Now, why is it called the gap? It's the information gap between what you know how to do and what you want to know how to do. Make sense? Because doesn't logic dictate that unless you're a couch potato and don't feel like getting up to go to work 5 days a week, right? Doesn't it stand to reason that if you knew how to make the type of money that you want to make, that you'd already be doing it? Like if you already had the skills to make $300,000 a year, you'd already be making $300,000 a year. You guys with me on that? Does that make sense? Right? So what happens is we all have it, right? We all have a gap between what we want to make and what we know how to make. And the reason being, the gap lies in, well, shoot, there's an information gap. There's a skills gap, right? Because it always comes down to knowledge, skills, or process, right? Something is missing so that you're not earning the type of money that you want to be. Okay. So what we're going to talk about today is what's going to help kind of close that gap. Maybe some mistakes that you're making, maybe some things that you're not doing enough of. Okay. Now, I just want to take a real quick aside, right? And everybody do me a favor, type how many more years you're going to be in commercial real estate brokerage. I really want to put your gap into perspective, right? Very important to understand why you're learning something, because then you have perspective on it. How many more years? Carla, Dave, Missy, how many more years you guys want to be? Okay, Missy says 20. Okay, Pietro says 10 to 15. Okay, cool. All right, good. Dave says 10. Okay, all right. Now, here's the fun one. Take your gap and multiply it by the amount of years you are going to be in commercial real estate. Greg says, as long as you're alive. Love it, dude. Love it. Yeah. This stuff gets in your bones. We've spoken before. You know, it gets in your bones. You don't ever want to stop doing this. But let's just say for some people, they want to retire at X age. Okay. Till I die or decide to retire, I'm 40 years in. Yeah, absolutely. Yep. So Carlos says 10 years. Judith says 5 to 7. Skybank says 30. Okay. Now multiply that number by your gap number that you just calculated. Okay. Very, very important. Yes. Missy says $4.480 million. So you can't just look at what your gap is. You have to look at what the cost is of you not knowing the right things to do. And that's what we're here to talk about, folks. We're talking about the right things to do and avoiding the wrong things to do. Okay. So does that make sense, everybody? If you have a gap in your skills or your knowledge, okay, you are paying life every year to not know how to do those things. And if you pay life the same thing, your gap times 10 years, guess what? It's not let's say $100,000 problem. It's $1 million problem not to know those skills. Okay, so let's go further. All right, top 10 mistakes, do's and don'ts of commercial brokerage. Now, very, very important. How many of you have ever said, oh man, I'm going to make 50 dials today and I'm going to take on the world and I'm going to start taking listings. I'm going to do this. I'm going to do that. And you get there and you look at a property and you start going down the rabbit hole and you start you don't want to sound unprepared when you get to the call. So you start going down a rabbit hole and instead of making 50 dials that day, you make like 5 or 6. Show of hands, type of 1 in the chat if that's ever happened to you, right? Because most people do not what we call batch their work, okay? There's a reason why Henry Ford created the assembly line. Why? Because it's the most efficient way of doing work, okay? Does anybody know what that means? It means you do this job, then you do this job, then you do this job, then you do this job. You don't do this, then this, then this, then this, then this. It's completely inefficient. Your brain has to switch gears. Your mind has to go to different programs, what have you, okay? So yeah, Gus, the drunk monkey, 100%, right? So nobody that's successful at doing large volumes of outreach does one property at a time. Can you imagine if a chef went to the restaurant and cooked one meal at a time for one person and then took the next meal and cooked it for them? It makes no sense. Like no one would ever get fed. They have to have 10 things going at once. So what we want you to do is we want you to do all of one thing, then all of the next, then all of the next, then all of the next. It'll increase your efficiency and it'll allow you to do as much volume as possible. Very, very important. So you need to dedicate time to do your research before picking up the phone, okay? Don't go down the rabbit hole. In order to speak to someone intelligently about their property, we are in the information age, folks. So you can open up CoStar and see everything that's happened with that property over the last 30 years. Okay. You don't need to go do a whole book report on one property, because guess what? The person might not even pick up the phone. Okay. Very, very important. Next, not learning your contract and paperwork cold. Folks, before you are going, and you're especially for newer agents, most of them don't know the why behind the what. So they don't know why they're filling out the paperwork. They don't know why. Like I have a real distaste is probably the best word for using LOIs, unless they are necessary. Now, what I'm going to say is a little bit controversial, but I do not like LOIs on sales. They are a necessary evil with leasing, because you don't want to go negotiating a lease deal back and forth on the lease contract. It's on the lease form itself. But with sales, okay, you need to know that the path to the path with the least amount of resistance is going to be the highest probability path for you. And unless you know why you're using LOIs, unless you know why you're using commercial contracts, not knowing the ins and outs of your contracts will slow you down, and you'll be putting deals together, but they fall apart all the time because you don't know what you're doing and not learning the ins and outs of the contracts and paperwork. Does that make sense, folks? Yep. Greg says we use RFP, not LOI ever. Yeah, because at the end of the day, an LOI goes back and forth and back and forth and back and forth. And after 2 or 3 weeks and a whole bunch of back and forth, it's still not legally binding. It's as legally binding as a Kleenex, and it means nothing, zero. Okay, so very, very important to understand. You have to know why you're using different paperworks so that you can use them effectively. They're just like tools, folks. But you have to be using the right tool for the right job. Next up, not qualifying buyers and tenants. Now, I know Greg's going to be on board with me with this one, right? Okay, because he's been around a long time, been around the block. Early in your careers, folks, for those of you that have been in the business a while, right? Ron, Greg, so forth, right? How many of you, Gus, right? How many of you have ever sent reports and gone to LoopNet and showed buildings and showed lease space and so on and so forth? And the next thing you know, the people, they go into the witness protection program. They completely evaporate, right? Right? I see you smiling, Gus. We've all done it. We've all been there. I'm guilty as charged, right? I've been doing leasing since 2003, right? And there's been plenty of times where I search the market, put up with the whole thing, that people don't even show up when I'm going to show them. Why? Shame on me. I didn't qualify them properly. There's a very specific qualification process. If you are going to work with buyers and tenants, just know, number one, that they're lower probability than working as a listing agent. But if you are going to work with buyers and tenants, you have to do everything in your power to qualify them properly. I'm just going to give you a little gold nugget here. Don't ever take someone and put them in your car, or go start spending a large amount of time searching for properties for them if you haven't been to their facility first, right? The reason being, in a 10-minute tour of their facility, you'll see things that they would never even bring up in a 3-hour conversation on the phone. You'll notice whether the girls have enough space, or there's enough balance of men to women, ladies' bathrooms, right? You'll notice if the courtyard has enough turning radius for trucks. You'll notice if boxes are stacked all the way to the ceiling. You'll notice if the workers are on top of each other sharing cubicles. You'll see all these things that you might never get out of a phone conversation. Seeing is believing. Go there, walk the property, and find out what they like about it, what they don't like about it, and why they need to move. Those are just 3 basic qualification questions, folks. But I would not ever spend a minute's time with anyone unless they knew they were ready, willing, and mostly able. Okay, it has to be all 3. Unless you get all 3, doesn't work. Just like a combination lock, right? 24 to the right, 12 to the left, 16 to the right, and it opens, right? If you're missing any one of those, the lock doesn't open. It's the same exact thing in brokerage, guys. They have to be ready, willing, and able. Otherwise, you're going to get let me think about it. Or they ghost you. If they don't have a true need, right, they're going to ghost you. Show of hands, folks. If you, heaven forbid, you got into a car wreck, or you fell into quicksand. How about this one? Guys, if you fell into quicksand and a stranger came along and wanted to help you, right, would you ever in a million years say, let me think about it? Type in the chat, yes or no. Right. Yeah, exactly. Exactly. I see Elvis, you're smiling. Yeah, exactly. It's absurd, right? It's completely absurd. No, 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 Pietro, Gus, Tyler. Exactly, folks. So when someone says they've got to think about it, they don't have urgency. They're not serious, right? Because if I was bleeding on the side of the road and I got into a car wreck or something like that, and an ambulance drove by and they said, "Hey, can we help you?" I'd be like, "Let me think about it. Let me know next time you're around." Hey, oh, it's gonna be take me to the hospital as quickly as you can. You with me, guys? Does that make sense? When you don't qualify people well enough, you're going to get that. I got to think about it. I got to. No, 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 no. When you know someone has urgency, I promise you, they will do what's necessary. When someone has twice as many employees in a small space as the space will allow for, they have urgency. If they have half as many employees in a space and they're spending way too much money and the business is going down the tubes, they have urgency. But if it's just okay, then they're kicking tires looking. If someone ever tells you, a lease or a buyer, that they're looking for a deal, stay away from them. Refer them to your enemy, because they're never going to do anything but waste your time. Okay, a little bit of a side note for you. Okay, next up, not knowing what your time is worth. How many of you guys right here? Okay, when I say guys, it's a unisex term. Okay, how many of you know exactly what your time is worth down to the penny per hour? Elvis, what's your time worth, buddy? Put it in the chat. Who does? Who does? And if you don't know, that's okay. If you say don't know, put IDK, like I don't know. Okay. Pietro says $150 an hour. Okay. Ray doesn't. Okay. Awesome. Good, good, good. Here's how you figure it out, guys. Remember that number that you put that you want to earn in the next 12 months? It's very, very simple. And I do this all the time just because I want everyone to start thinking along these terms. Okay. Whatever your time is worth, take that number, go ahead and put it in. Put it in the chat. Okay. Now take that number and divide it by 2,000. What that is, that's 50 weeks a year, 40 hours a week. That's 2,000 worked hours. Okay. And then write that number in the chat. Okay. So for instance, if you want to make $200,000 in the next year, and this year, and you divide that by 2,000, your time is worth $100 per hour. Okay. What that means is you cannot afford to do anything less than $100 an hour work. Does that make sense, folks? Does that make any sense? Okay, right? So if you want to earn $200,000 next year, you can't afford to be doing $10 an hour work, okay? Right? Judith says $175 an hour. Love it. Exactly, Judith, that's a great point. So think about it. Can you get a marketing assistant for less than $175 an hour? You better believe it. Can you get a transaction coordinator? And Greg says you won't make $300 an hour if you're not face-to-face. Absolutely. Guys, prospecting, presenting, and following up. Those are the three things that you make you the most amount of money. Greg hit it right on the head. Exactly. Folks, if you are not doing those things, all right, and conversely, if you're not delegating out those duties, once you know how to do them, okay, once you know how to do the highest things, prospecting, presenting, following up, that's the only way that you're going to earn the money that you're worth, is by doing the highest value activities. So what I would recommend, so you know, write down every step of your business model and then look at it, each step. It should only be 10, 12, whatever, steps. Okay. Then what I would do is I would take a look and I would say, what don't I need to do? What can I pay less than, in Judith's case, $175 an hour? Do you think you can get a marketing assistant from the Philippines for less than $175 an hour? You better believe it. Do you think you can get a transaction coordinator to mind your transactions for $400 and they only get paid? They get paid on contingency, which means only if the deal closes. Would that make more sense? You better believe it. And here's the best part. You charge the seller some sort of administrative fee, which covers the transaction coordinator. Guys, this is the difference between people making big bucks and people just getting by, or worse yet, failing out of the industry because they can't make the money that they need, and they're betting their life savings. Okay, so very, very important to understand, folks. You need to know what your time is worth, and most importantly, you need to be doing nothing, and I mean nothing, that is worth less than your time. You need to be client facing as much as possible, prospecting, presenting, and following up. Those are the three biggest ones, right? Very, very important. Or as they say here in Miami, muy importante. Okay, next up, not creating call lists and to-do lists the night before. How many of you guys, how many of you guys make call lists the night before? Or maybe I should rephrase that. How many of you guys want to have an edge on the competition? Show of hands. Come on, throw your cameras on, guys. Let's see. Party people. All right. How many of you want to have a leg up? How many of you people would like to be able to use a hack that's going to allow you to be more productive, more insightful, and smarter in the morning when you wake up? How many of you would like that? Okay. I don't know. Okay. I see some hands going up. Okay, cool. Now, here's how it goes. Your brain has this cool little thing. It's called the reticular activation center, right? And what it does is it allows you to connect dots. And here's the coolest part. It works best when you're sleeping. Your subconscious mind works for you while you're sleeping. Here's a perfect example. And I've mentioned this on previous live. So if you've heard me say it, well, it bears repeating. When I was, I guess like 17, 18 years old, I went to go buy a Honda Accord. I went to the dealership. And I test drove it, and it was the coolest car. You know, it was so nice. Like my first car didn't have any air conditioning, whatever, right? So I was like, finally got a car with air conditioning, yada, yada, yada. So I'm all excited. I'm on the way home from the dealership, okay? And like every third car I saw on the road, guess what it was? Honda Accord, right? Now, what was that? That was my brain's reticular activation center that was starting to notice these things. What it does is the area of your brain that connects the dots for you. It's the area of your brain that's like, oh, hey, this thing and this thing, let's put those two together. Do you guys remember when you were kids playing that card game where you have like a purple elephant and a gray horse and a black zebra or whatever? And like you put the cards down and you gotta match them up. It's like a memory game. I don't know if you guys remember. I played it when I was a kid, right? But it's just like you got to match a purple elephant with another purple elephant. And then you got to match like a green dog with another green dog, right? It's the same thing. In brokerage, we're just doing that. We're trying to find this and this, and we're going to try to connect the dots. Here's how you do it. The way it's going to work with regard to number 6 here is you create a call list and a to-do list the night before. What will happen is as you sleep, your brain, believe it or not, it's a supercomputer, no matter how sometimes groggy you feel without your coffee in the morning, right? But your brain is a supercomputer. It is the most powerful supercomputer that you have at your disposal. And what it starts to do is it starts to connect those dots for you. You're going to wake up in the morning and be like, oh, you know, Mr. Jones, I should probably mention this to him. Oh, you know, Sally, I should probably do this. You're going to have ideas that come to you. I cannot tell you how many ideas come to me in the middle of the night. My girlfriend, she drives her nuts because it'll be 2:30 in the morning. I'll be like, oh my God, I just got this brand new idea about this. And it's crazy. Your brain looks for ways of connecting dots. Very, very important to understand. Okay. So knowing this, let's go ahead and get a leg up on the competition by creating your call list the night before, your to-do list the night before, and allow that supercomputer of yours to work to your benefit. Because I guarantee you 90% of the competition is not doing it. Does that make sense, folks? And for all the people that are on here, okay, 90% of you will listen to what I just said and not do anything about it. Please, for your own sake, be the exception to the rule, okay? Most people will not create. You see what I have right here, guys? This is my pad for the day for tomorrow, okay? After tonight's call, before I leave at the end of the day, I fill this out and I go, okay? Very, very important to understand, all right? You have to practice this stuff. It will work, I promise you. Because here's the thing, the things that I'm teaching you right now, right? Or bringing to your attention, or maybe just reminding you about, maybe you've heard this stuff before. Nothing here is going to be a game changer, right? But maybe this one gets you an extra 5%, and this one gets you an extra 10%, and this one gets you an extra 3%. And next thing you know, you start stacking these things up, and you know what's going to happen? You're going to have a 30 or 40 or 50% advantage on the competition. Who here wouldn't want a 30, 40, 50% advantage on the competition? Wouldn't you like to stack the deck in your favor, right? You know, like who here wants to play to win, right? Because there's no, like, in a listing presentation, there's no prize for second place. Does that make sense, folks? Right? Do me a favor. If you want to win, type in second place, right? because there's no prize for second place. And if you remember Ricky Bobby, what does dad tell him? If you ain't first, you're last, right? Ricky Bobby, if any of you remember Talladega Nights. Anyhow, now, this one's very important, folks. Very, very important to understand. You have to know how to protect yourself and your commission, okay? I would love to tell you the world of real estate is a nice, warm, fuzzy place where everyone's going to look out for your best interest and everyone's going to be kind and considerate and nice. Let me tell you, folks, okay, it's not. And I don't like to be cynical. Anyone that knows me personally knows I'm a very positive guy, but I have been in many, many, many situations where you give someone the smallest amount of leeway and they take complete and utter advantage of it. I will go on record as saying, every time I've ever given anyone the smallest amount of leeway to take advantage, they did 100% of the time. Now, I'm not saying you get screwed out of commissions all the time, but you'll be the last person to get paid. You'll have to jump up and down and beg for your money unless you have things right. So my point is, you need to know how to protect yourself and your commission. What happens is a lot of brokers in this business are coming from a place of scarcity. So they're thinking of ways of like how to grab every penny, okay? And if you are not careful, if you are not papering up, if you are not doing the things necessary to protect yourself and your commission, I promise you with 1000% certainty at some point or another, you will be taken advantage of. And in this business, it's not tens of dollars. It's not hundreds of dollars. It's thousands of dollars or tens of thousands of dollars, if not more. One point on a commission that I did about a year and a half ago was $50,000. And even though I negotiated every which way and even had a contract going back and forth, the last thing that the seller negotiated, I was working with a buyer friend of mine, and the seller cut me out of $50,000. It was 1 point on a $150,000 fee, right? And you know what? Shame on me. I knew better, but I didn't want to endanger the deal because the owner is real skittish and so forth. But every single time you give someone the leeway, they will. Most people aren't as kind, right? I don't want to say every time because there are a lot of nice people out there, but there are also people out there that will take advantage. So unless you know how to protect yourself, you're leaving yourself open to someone doing what they feel like. And if it's a large sum of money, people's ethics go out the window, unfortunately. Okay, it's just the way the world works. Okay. If this stuff is resonating with you guys, okay, if you're getting value here and you want to learn how to build a predictable business, if you guys want to learn how to take listings on a regular, repeated basis, type #training in the notes, right? And whether you're seeing in the comments on Facebook or if you're seeing on Zoom, right? If you want to learn how to harness your business and do the things the right way the first time, okay, type #training. We have a 6-month training program. We'd love to walk you through and show you how to get from where you're going, where you are to where you're going faster. Okay, folks, very, very important. Okay, now let's see. Next up, trying to buy the business. I can't tell you, I have a lot of conversations with residential agents. And on the residential side of the business, everybody needs a roof over their head, right? So there's a lot of ways of like buying leads and paying for this and paying for that. In commercial, there's no substitute for the hard work. Absolutely not. Never in a million years, right? Very, very important. You have to understand, folks, there's no buying this business, okay? The residential side, you can get away with, hey, well, give us $1,000 or $1,500 a month, and we'll put leads in your inbox. Just doesn't work that way on the commercial side. Why? Because not everybody needs a commercial building. Not everybody is a commercial seller. The amount of people that are out there that own commercial properties, those are the people that you want to work with if you want to work with commercial listings. Those types of people, it's one of those things where they're just not in abundance. So you need to know where to go to find them. Very, very important. Okay. So very important to understand. Next up, not learning to let the prospect speak and really listen. Okay. Now, for those of you that understand personality and personality styles and so forth, has anyone here familiar with a DISC assessment, DISC? Okay, cool. Yeah, love it, love it. All right. So what we find, a lot of people that own commercial properties, they are high Ds, right? They are go-getters. They want to get down to it, right? They want to get down to business. A lot of real estate agents, okay, And I'm one of them. Okay. This is the reason why I have this live training. I love to chit chat. I love to talk, right? Now, the only thing is you need to know when to talk and when to listen. The people that are a lot of real estate agents are what you call a high I, right? Of the DISC model. It's basically the animal is the parrot, which means they like to chit chat. A lot of them fall in love with the sound of their own voice. How many of you have ever been on the phone with another real estate agent and they just wouldn't shut up, right? Right. And then you just, you couldn't get a word in edgewise, right? Okay. What the problem is, we have 2 ears and 1 mouth, and we should listen twice as much as we speak. But most people don't get that, because if you're not intently listening on a call, I promise you, you're missing it. If you're too busy talking about me and me and me and me, the great I, okay, you are missing it, okay? Missy says, our rule is just let that other agent speak because they will end up telling you what you need to know. That's true. That's a really good point, Missy. Absolutely. Sooner or later, like if you're in negotiations, oh yeah, just let them go. Want to take that another step further? Take them out for a cup of coffee. Get that caffeine going. Maybe an energy drink. Or here in Miami, we have cafecito. Woo! Get them loaded up on some caffeine. Watch out. You know what I mean? So, but on the whole, when you're in front of a seller, you do not want to be a blabbermouth. You want to ask pointed questions. You want to ask questions that are going to get you the answers that you need, and listen for those answers. Very, very important. But a lot of times people get nervous when they're young, when they're new, and they're starting off in commercial, let's say, and they don't want people to think that they don't know what they're talking about, so they wind up talking too much. How many of you have ever gotten nervous? This is myself included. Okay, I've gotten nervous before and talked too much, right? Especially when you're new, you're like, oh shoot, I don't want this person to not know to think that I don't know what I'm talking about. And what you want to be doing is you wind up talking so much that they know you know what you're talking about. There's an old saying: it's better to be thought dumb than to open your mouth and remove all doubt, right? So, not saying anyone here is dumb, but you get the point of the adage, right? It's very important to sit closed, mouth closed, ears open, because that's how you are going to do more business, by listening for what people say and listening to what people don't say. Very, very important. Okay. Awesome. Next one is chasing huge deals in the beginning. Oh gosh, I love this one. Okay. I was guilty of it. Okay. I'll be the first to admit it. I know how to do $10 million times a 3 or 4 or 5 or 6% fee. Okay. Every one of us is guilty of it. We've all done it. $20 million, whatever. And when you get into brokerage, you're like, wait a minute. I can do a deal and I can make $500,000. What? That's crazy. I can do a deal and do $1 million. Oh my gosh. Where do I go for those? Guess what? Everybody wants to close those deals. And what makes you think that in your first month or 6 months or year or 2 years that you have the ability to close deals like that? There's a reason why the old timers are crushing deals like that over and over again, because they know how to handle them. Make sense, folks? The analogy I always use is like the dog chasing the school bus. I used to have this cute little beagle, right? And he used to chase my school bus all the time. But guess what? If he caught the school bus, he still wouldn't know how to drive it. You with me? So the unfortunate thing is, too early in your career, agents try to chase huge deals. And what happens is you get step 1, step 2, step 3, it fails. Step 1, step 2, step 3, it fails. Step 1, step 2, it fails. Whereas if you do smaller deals, step 1, step 2, step 3, step 4, step 5, it closes. Step 1, step 2, step 3, step 4, step 5, it closes. You will learn more from doing a deal that you earn $1,000 on than falling on your face for a deal that you would earn $1 million on. Why? Because you do the entire process, and you get to learn how to rinse, wash, repeat, refine. If you're only doing step 1, 2, 3 every time and falling on your face, you're never going to get to rinse, wash, repeat, refine. Make sense, folks? Does that make sense? Guys, do me a favor. Type a 1 in the chat if that makes sense to you. Ron says, I do 8 to 10 deals a year. I do 1 to 5 million and 1 or 2, 10 million. Exactly. Yeah, guys. But Ron earned the right to be there because he's been in the business for decades. Don't think that a newbie broker is going to be able to come in and do that. Okay. Hope that makes sense for you guys. Trust me, you will have your time at the table and it will come. But first thing you have to do, you need to build a repeatable business. And then as you get good, selling a $400,000 property is actually sometimes harder than selling a $4 million property because the people involved, they need a lot more coaching and teaching and stuff like that. Sometimes you're babysitting, but you need to first learn how to close $400,000 properties before you go after a $4 million property or $14 million property or $40 million property. Does that make sense, folks? Y'all with me? Okay, cool. And now finally, dun, 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 not having a mentor, right? Did you ever have your parents tell you, I made these mistakes so you don't have to? Show of hands, anyone? Anyone ever, right? I did this so you don't have to. Elvis is with me, right? Folks, someone else has already gone down Main Street and hit that pothole. Do you want to ding your rims or do you want to swerve around the pothole and watch the guy in front of you? Isn't that a little bit more painless, right? Because here's the thing, you never get time back, right? Time is the one thing you cannot buy. Do you think Steve Jobs on his deathbed would have liked to have bought his time back, right? Ray says, I tell that to my kids all the time. Exactly. My father told it to me. I remember where I was. I was okay. So this is a construction project, and I was putting in a shower head, and I was like hammer drilling into this thing of concrete. He said, Chris, what are you doing? I made the mistake so you don't have to. Just let me show you. And I was trying to do it the hard way, right? That's when I learned. Learn from other people's mistakes. It speeds up your learning curve. Okay. By the way, how many of you guys would like to speed up your learning curve? Type #learning, right? Okay. The fastest, and I mean the fastest way to learn. Right? Have you ever noticed, okay, not when you were a teenager, but in your 20s and maybe 30s, how smart your father was, how smart your grandfather was, how wise the older ones were? Why? Because they watched, they have experience, they have hit the potholes, they've stepped on the landmines, you know? I remember hearing this old analogy, and they said, this old man sits out in the corner, right? He's 80 years old, and he sees what's going on. And they asked him, what do you think would happen if this event were to occur? And they said, what would you think would happen if someone jumped off of that 2-story building? He said, well, probably a good chance they'd probably break a leg, maybe break their arm too. And sure enough, someone jumped off the building and they saw they broke their leg and their arm. He said, how did you know that? You're so smart. He said, no, I'm not smart. But if you watch 100 people do the same thing over and over again, and 70 of them break their leg, you know, another 20 of them break their arm and their leg, and 10% of them walk away unscathed. Guess what, folks? It's just experience, right? So people, you know, time in the game, there's absolutely no substitute for. There's no substitute for experience, for seeing something over and over and over again. You know, when you do the same thing over and over again, you get really good at predicting the outcome, right? iPhone says, I've mentored many newbies in the business. None work for me. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, it's tough. It's tough. You got to get people that are willing to learn. But oftentimes, you know, building out a team can be very, very tough. Yeah. Okay. So folks, having a mentor helps you immensely. Why? There's an old saying, the reason we can see so far is because we stood on the shoulders of giants. The reason why we've been able to learn, you know, generations, why society and civilization has been able to advance is because we learn from people. Think about it. How many of you read Socrates? Or how many of you read Plato? Or how many of you read Marcus Aurelius? This is stuff that was written 2,000 years ago, right? We're still borrowing from the knowledge that came 2,000 years ago. So someone else has already done it. Someone else has already made the mistakes. Why don't you make your life a little bit easier and learn from them, right? So if you're looking to learn a repeated model, this is how we do it, folks, okay? The 4 steps of the dark horse process are this. Just like baseball, think of a baseball diamond. First base, you book your first meeting. We can get you to do that in 7 days. Second base, you prep for your first meeting. We can do that in a couple of days. Third base, you get your first listing. We can do that in 30 days or less. And home base is get your first listing sold. Okay. That has to do with like how well you price it and stuff like that. But it's a repeatable process we show people how to do over and over and over again. 2 students that came in the last 30 days took 2 listings in their first 30 days. How many of you guys want to take 2 listings in your next 30 days in the business, right? If that's something that's of interest, type #2 listings, right? Because all we do, folks, once we teach you the process, we rinse, wash, repeat, refine. Rinse, wash, repeat, refine. It's the same thing over and over again. You put your pants on one leg at a time. The first time you tied your shoes, it was probably difficult, but now you can do it with your eyes closed. Okay. Very, very important.